Welcome to the SDG Media Zone. I'm Elaine Reyes, host of UN Insider on CGTN. Today we're talking about cities on the front line of disaster risk. Disaster risk reduction is the work of making choices well, so we prevent new risks from being created, reduce the risks that already exist, and build the kind of resilience that protects lives, homes, and livelihoods over the long run. It's a core piece of the UN Sendai framework, and it touches almost every part of sustainable development. This year's International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction carries the theme, Resilience Starts at Home. And with the Sustainable Development Goals on clean water, infrastructure, and sustainable cities all under review this year, the question of whether our cities are truly built to protect people feels more urgent than ever. So joining me now to dig into all of this is Kamal Kishore, Special Representative of the UN Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction and head of UNDRR, and Dr. Esam Halawani, Director of the Decision Support Center at the Al Madina Region Development Authority in Saudi Arabia. Thank you both for being here for this important conversation.
Wonderful to be here.
Well, I want to pose this first question to you both. We are seeing climate hazards like extreme heat and flooding becoming more frequent and interconnected. I mean, we're seeing the headlines every single day. So from your perspective, is the pace of our city planning keeping up with the speed of climate change, or are we already falling behind? Kamal, let's hear from you first.
So thank you for that question. I think the picture is somewhat mixed. On one hand, there is great demand from cities for investing in resilience, and many cities are doing great things. Our own program, Making Cities Resilient by 2030, has now nearly 2,000 members. 2,000 cities are a part of it. Our colleague from Al Madina would know that Al Madina is also a part of this campaign, soon to be Resilience Hub, investing in not only its own resilience, but also mentoring other cities. And cities from many different parts of the world, from Brisbane to Bonn, from Mumbai to Montreal. Cities are really doing great things to make themselves resilient to urban floods, to heat, and so on. So there's a lot that is happening, but it is not nearly enough. The pace of urbanization is not keeping pace with the need for investment in resilience. In many cases, cities are expanding into flood zones. Cities are creating built environment which is not conducive to extreme heat conditions. So it's both. On one hand, there's a lot of momentum. On the other hand, there is a lot that remains to be done. And cities have really unique challenges that they're facing, and they're confronting those challenges.
What do you say to that, Dr.
Well,
Halawani?
I'll try to be as positive as I can. And the answer is yes and no. The progress that cities are reporting is basically can be tackled from three different dimensions, if I may. One that has to do with awareness, one that has to do with policy and planning, and the third one with actual execution. Now, awareness, I don't think there is a city on the world that has not been affected or not aware of climate change. Of course, that is a result of a remarkable effort done by mainly three stakeholders: the IPCC reporting, the wonderful work that the UNDRR has been working, and also, thirdly, the financial regulative agencies was basically factoring the ESG standard as part of the investment requirement. Now, that's with regards to the awareness. For Saudi Arabia, we've been a signatory of the Paris Accord since 2016. We are very much committed to achieving net zero carbon footprint by 2060. And we're also disseminating all of these learning into our Vision 2030. And we're targeting this very seriously and very, sensitively. Now, when it comes to that is in terms of the awareness. Policy and planning. Now, this is where it gets complicated, because ideally the issue here and the area of improvement comes to the enforcement of regulations, the speed of enforcement, and the lack of localized climate data. And that causes the black box effect from an investment perspective. Now, having that missing, then policy, planning, and foreign direct investment, specifically when it comes to resilience projects, becomes a challenge. From the infrastructure and the infrastructure projects being deployed, many countries have advanced, but it depends on how severe the climate change has affected those cities. So the most affected cities are reporting the best progress. In our case, huge investments are taking place that wants us to mitigate and overcome heat stress and floods in Saudi Arabia.
There has to be a lot of buy-in and support from local governments. Kamal, the theme of this year's International Day for Disaster Risk Reduction, which is marked annually on October 13th, is Resilience Starts at Home. Going to what we've been talking about, what conversation are you hoping that theme will spark?
See, the first thing is this, that in any disaster, we just had an earthquake in Venezuela, we've noticed that 40 to 50%, sometimes up to 60% losses are in the housing sector. People are affected, their houses are damaged or completely destroyed, and unless you build back better, or in the first place build resilient housing, we will never be able to get ahead of disasters. So it's really important that we invest in resilient housing. That's the conversation we want to foster this year. On one hand, you have so much losses occurring in housing sector during disasters. On the other hand, most cities across the world, whether they are in the advanced economies or developing countries, small island developing states or landlocked countries or least developed countries, all the countries across the world are facing a housing crisis. We need to close that gap. So our case is that while we try to close that gap and ensure housing for all, we must ensure that housing is built not for the past risk, but for the future risk. And we build it in a manner that it is resilient. When you are building a new house, making it resilient costs only a few percentage more, 5% more compared to, the way it is being done now. But when you have to retrofit it, it costs you 20%, 30% more. And when you have to rebuild it after it has been lost to a disaster, it costs 100% more. So it makes eminent financial, economic sense that we invest in resilient housing while we are trying to close the housing gap in the world. There is another reason why we want to pursue this theme of resilience begins at home. Resilience is not something which can be left to just governments alone. It cannot be left to the private sector or regulators. It has to become a mass movement. If it has to become a mass movement, every household has to become a participant in that mass movement. When you go to buy a new house, a new apartment, most people are concerned about the quality of their flooring, the kind of faucets in the bathroom. I would like them to ask questions to their builders. Is my house resilient to earthquakes if I'm in an earthquake-prone area? Is it built taking into account flood risk, or am I buying a house in a floodplain? I want every single household to be a participant in a global movement on building resilience for all. And that's why we're saying resilience begins at home.
Because you look around the world and so many houses that already exist were not built to withstand some of the climate impacts we are seeing today. Yes. And most of the time, the most vulnerable populations are, at risk.
Exactly, yes. So it is really important that, all of those people participate in this. I mean, the risk that we have already, as you said in your opening remark, if the risk is already there, we have to do what we can to either, have a managed retreat from those areas or retrofit houses. But as we build more houses, because many more people need houses in urban areas, people who are moving from rural to urban areas need housing, we must ensure that all of that housing is built in a manner that it is resilient to climate hazards.
Dr. Halawani, when it comes to the cities, I mean, we are seeing with the heat, for example, infrastructure just melting on streets. And of course, when we see disasters, it's wiping out infrastructure as well. So what are the decisions that local leaders can make to determine, what they need to do in terms of developing and changing the way they develop infrastructure around cities?
Well, we have arrived at a certain formula in Madina, and we refer to it as the Madina way of city resilience. And the way we looked at it is, first of all, leaders need to discover what does city resilience means to them, reflecting the uniqueness of their city and its challenges. Now, it's very important to adopt scientific research to or scientific evidence to produce temporal risk assessment that enables decision making, policy, and planning. Now, for that to happen comes the second challenge. Now, the second challenge is this: we believe that balanced and localized planning and strategy is fundamentally important, because if those strategies and planning are not balanced and localized, the treatment plans will not be as effective. And that is very important. That's why you see sometimes in some nations we copy and paste certain structures, certain architectures, certain facade that is not suitable for certain areas. And that's why you see the mismanagement and you see the difficulties that comes within the resilience of those housing structures or even bridges.
Doesn't work for every place.
Exactly, exactly. And then we have arrived to that level. That's why being balanced is very important to the city resilience strategy and city resilience planning. And from Madina's perspective, we look at it from 4 lenses: the human, the infrastructure, the environment, and policy. So when we look at a certain strategic challenge from resilience, from a resilience perspective, we have to investigate it in this way. And we follow through the entire process from data collection to intervention. And that's why the most balanced the process is, the most balanced the treatment plan and effective treatment plan will become. Now, the third level that we have reached to is for leaders to achieve consensus on the resilience issues, agreement on the issues, to prioritize them in terms of the city or the regional agenda. And then maybe then we can agree on the investment, agree on that priority. Without these being in place, that is so localized, the treatment plan and our view of city resilience become, let's say, inefficient, ineffective, and that is a big problem that when it comes to the application of city resilience altogether.
Kamal, you're just agreeing and nodding your head in agreement. What needs to change, though, so that development reduces the risk rather than creates it?
I think what Dr. Halawani said is really, really important. The whole notion of building a consensus, a ground-up consensus. I think ultimately city resilience is about meeting the aspirations of citizens. And they have to articulate, of course, their articulation has to be informed by evidence of where the risk is and what kind of risk is there. But it's ultimately citizens' aspiration of what is the kind of resilient life they want for themselves and their future generations. And once you have that consensus and once you have that priority that he just talked about, then you can begin to talk about how do we begin to pursue those priorities. And in that context, there are cities that are facing unique challenges. I think it's not the same everywhere, as he just said. Many cities, particularly in developing world, has the real issue of money. The fiscal space is really constrained. 70 to 80% of a city's income, city government's income, goes into paying salaries of their staff. They have limited fiscal space for investing in resilience. So what is the kind of innovation we can bring in? Can we have more transparent, more uniform metrics of resilience so that investing in resilience for investors, including private investors, becomes attractive and you begin to make a very solid investment case for resilience. And once you do that, you can actually, you enter some sort of a virtuous cycle and you can hope for a much better, more resilient future. I think it's really absolutely critical that we make it happen at the level of cities. I always say that disasters don't happen in countries. In that sense, I would almost say that countries are a myth. Cities and towns and villages are the real deal. It's not, a disaster has happened in Venezuela. It has happened in specific cities. And the citizens there have a real stake. So if we can set up a system where citizens become the primary actors and not just subjects of intervention of resilience agenda, then we have a momentum that could be unstoppable.
Right, they need to be part of the solution.
Absolutely, they have to lead it.
And staying, you mentioned innovation, there's the talk of technology, and Dr. Halawani, we know that cities are experimenting with new technology, with data, with digital tools. What would you say, or what do you think is the greatest opportunity for innovation to help cities anticipate and reduce risk?
Well, see, this is an important question because it points to the elephant in the room, and every city that we speak to, among which is ours. We believe that the key to innovation and resilience happens to be the city's capability to harness data and technology to develop platforms that inform decision making and planning. For example, in Madina, we have led that initiative. We've developed a unique platform. We refer to it as Manara Urban Platform that synthesize all data, urban indicators, and even projects with their metadata into one platform and link all of that to the SDGs for sustainability and resilience. That is to enable our stakeholders to be part of the process and for us to also inspire others. This platform allowed us to produce 2 VLRs so far. We've just announced and celebrated our second VLR in Madina. We also have a very unique initiative when it comes to the intelligence that this kind of platform produces for the resilience agenda, which is Madina Resilience Report, first of its kind in Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. And this report opens Pandora's box to have that maturity to look at issues in order to resolve them. And within that report, there's a very significant measure. We've developed our own Madina City Resilience Index. In this way, we can quantify and measure Madina cities' resilience at a neighborhood level. So every neighborhood had its own score with multiple dimensions. And this is extremely important because when the time comes for us to produce Madina City Resilience Strategy, we know that one size does not fit all.
And certainly, I mean, everything that you're experiencing or working toward, it's a learning experience. So even with some of the recent disasters we've seen, certainly there's been data or measurements that is working to help future disasters as well.
Absolutely. I think the point that he made about coming up with the resilience metrics which serve a particular city in a very specific way is really important. Then you begin to see what is actual result of your investment. This is where you were and you invested in resilience, and this is where you are now. So I think it's really important to develop that and really make it de-jargonize it, demystify it so that it is relatable and citizens can take ownership of those concepts and really stand behind those and make a public case, create a social demand for investment in resilience.
Right, they can see that it works and it can work in other places.
Absolutely. In our case, Madina has scored the highest average cash inflow in Saudi Arabia post-COVID. And the reason for that is that we're trying to illuminate the black box effect. Now, investors and bankers and even foreign direct investors and even entrepreneurs know exactly where to invest, how to invest, which technology do they need to resolve which resilience issue the city needs. And all of these are very important because our population is 1.5 million and growing at 2.345%. But also we're targeting 30 million visitors by 2030. The level of stress that this kind of demands and ambitions put on all of our infrastructure, looking at that from a systems perspective, then we can ask the right questions, collect the right data, investigate the 4 lenses, map this into a research project, and then suggest the balanced treatment plan that allows the city to grow and become more resilient in the most sustainable way. Because sometimes investment in billions of dollars worth of infrastructure is not the sustainable solution. We learned the hard way that a combination of policy, perhaps optimizing consumer behavior, and enhancing the infrastructure will give us the right formula to achieve sustainability. So this is a different kind of discussion, a different kind of thought of how to tackle resilience. And that is precisely what we're very proud of at Al Madina.
Well,
there are 2 big takeaways from what he just said. One is that when you have a good, rigorous way of measuring resilience, you attract money, you attract investment, and you show the results in that direction of resilience. And the second thing is that innovation or appropriation of any new technology must not be supply driven. It must be demand driven. a city has to articulate its aspiration. Its citizens have to articulate where they want to go. And they have to come up with their own problem statement. They have to articulate their own demand. And then you know what kind of technology, what kind of innovation you need in that particular city. Otherwise, you have a case of a solution looking for a problem.
A couple minutes left from
Sure.
both of you. Would love one final message that you would like to share.
Well, one last message for all the cities. Now, as cities grow, trying to look for solutions, be mindful of what and whom you're leaving behind. And what I refer to by what is leaving the local vernacular, the legacy, and what makes the city special, especially its competitive advantage. And whom they're leaving behind are those vulnerable people who are struggling to catch up. So we are running towards the future, trying to become smart and resilient and sustainable. Just be mindful of these two elements.
I would say that build on the city's initiative, innovation, and resourcefulness for a resilient future for the planet. Early next year, we will have IPCC's special report on cities, which is great. We've been waiting for it for a long time. And we really hope that cities can show the world, can exercise global leadership. I would like much greater voice of cities on global forums such as, here at the United Nations. They should have direct access to finance. They should be empowered more and more and have the facility to exercise their leadership for global effort towards resilience.
Mr. Kamal Kishore, Dr. Esam Halawani, thank you both for joining us for this very important conversation.
Thank you.
And that's it from the SDG Zone. Follow the conversation with #GlobalGoals and #SDG Live.